So like I always say about an ADHD assessment or diagnosis, it's not a label, like it's an understanding of yourself and the condition, that you have. But getting that diagnosis is the opportunity to really grow, like, so how do you go from getting the diagnosis to supporting yourself? Like the diagnosis is just a piece of paper, but what do you do next has been key in my life.
Danny Buckley, thank you very much for joining me.
Thanks, Connor. Thanks for asking me up to Dublin.
Well, you were here anyway, right? You were here on government business, right?
Yeah, I was doing a talk for ADHD Ireland on an EU project at the moment about ADHD and entrepreneurship. So I enjoyed it. Yeah, it was a very informative session and just share my story also. So it was enjoyable.
Right in your wheelhouse.
Yeah.
Which we're going to talk about it right now. So ADHD Now. Can you kind of give a brief overview of what you do, roughly how big you are, when you started, and just a bit of background on the actual business?
Yeah, so ADHD Now would have started it in 2023. It's an ADHD online service. So we offer a full assessment, and we offer aftercare, which is psychiatry services and also therapy services. So like I always say about an ADHD assessment or diagnosis, it's not a label, like it's an understanding of yourself and the condition, that you have. But getting that diagnosis is the opportunity to really grow, like, so how do you go from getting the diagnosis to supporting yourself? Like the diagnosis is just a piece of paper, but what do you do next has been key in my life. So
And Danny, just on that, so like a little bit from my own experience, right? I was diagnosed with ADHD at age 34, right? 38 now. But after I got the diagnosis, there was very little aftercare. Now, I'll say that I got diagnosed in Portugal, so nothing to do with the Irish system or whatever. But in terms of the aftercare, because it's a spectrum, some people might have more problems, let's say, with time management, and other people might have more problems with hyper focus, or the different executive functions might be impacted. And for me, it took me much longer on my own to figure out where my particular weaknesses were, or whatever, or where I needed the most help. And I think the aftercare part would really help.
yeah, well, I think aftercare, like building ADHD now, aftercare for me is crucial in my own life. So I wanted to build a clinic, an online clinic, um, that allowed that, I suppose, that it had that had those supports in place. So therapy, psychiatry services. So we have the whole assessment side of it, but once you get that diagnosis, if you do get diagnosed, then you have supports in place through our company, whether it's therapy, whether it's psychiatry services, whether it's coaching, supports within the school system, supports in the educational system. Um, Really, that's the whole, like, and that's what I wanted to build, was that kind of care pathway forward, as well as getting the diagnosis, but the aftercare after that. So in terms of size now, we'd be approaching. So my other company is Autism Care. So say a couple of months later, after we built ADHD Now, we built Autism Care. So that's similar. Whereas it's not carried out entirely online. There's part of the process needs to be done in person. So we have clinics in Cork and Dublin now. We offer autism assessments, and aftercare, so therapy, speech and language therapy, occupational therapy, and we'd work very closely with schools and employers and stuff on that side of it as well, to support, the person going forward with their condition. In terms of numbers for both companies, we're approaching 100 staff. We've like, there's the mission and purpose behind it for me is to, I struggled with neurodiversity for a long time. And, it took until I was 32 to reach medical intervention. And I saw how important that medical intervention and the aftercare pathway for me was. So in this country, it didn't exist before. So the vision and passion, I suppose, around it was, the people that come after me, that they'd have an option of going to a service, whether it's ADHD or autism, and getting access to the services, and then, that pathway forward then to support them.
Like ADHD, it's called ADHD Now, right? So there has always been a problem with kind of trying to get the right psychiatrist and trying to get through the system, isn't that right? It's kind of well, it's helping speed up the process for people, right?
Yeah, it's helping speed up the process. And look, ADHD now, the name now, because there's barriers, there's bottlenecks everywhere in actually gaining access or accessing those clinicians. So now it's like, you can get access into a clinician within 7 days. So that's something we're very proud of. Like, there's nobody else in the market space that can offer that access. And for me, I suppose starting it with my co-founders, um, we were able to, explain to the clinicians what our mission was. We were able to offer them work from home. And I think even clinicians themselves are very passionate about the space. They choose this career direction for a reason, They want to help. So they understood the problem of, having a streamlined system here. And then, like, so we went out to recruit early days, consultant psychiatrists, chartered and clinical psychologists, assistant psychologists, nurse practitioners, counselors, therapists. Like, there's a full care team, medical multidisciplinary team in place. Then I suppose how we're able to retain them is because we've relied on the clinicians for engagement and running the company. So we've looked for their feedback and how we could make the service better. So um we've really gone into the digitalization of the process and automations and systems. We've looked to support the clinicians from an admin perspective, and also, support them educationally, and supervision is very important to them. So we've put all those structures in place, Connor, which has allowed our team to grow continuously.
Tell me a bit about your background and how, I suppose, how you got into it. Like you said already, you were diagnosed at 32, I think you said. Just talk to me a little bit about the kind of genesis of the business.
My own experience, I would have, gone through my whole entire life, being undiagnosed. Always thought there was something wrong with me, to be honest with you. Always kind of battled against myself, struggled with emotional dysregulation. Didn't know what emotions were, didn't know what a panic attack was. Simple, basic, emotional, that you people should have that emotional awareness. I just didn't have it. I would get like, if there was, I share it like consistently. Like, if there was something going on in my life, I wouldn't be able to do anything. My thoughts would take over, my emotions would take over, the fear would kick in. I struggled very bad with anxiety and fear, and there's a couple of life experiences that were really difficult for me. Like in 2014, I was diagnosed with a rare blood condition, and it resulted in me going on different types of immunosuppressive medication. And just, it was a very fearful time in my life. Like, if I was diagnosed then and had that emotional awareness, I would have been able to cope better, but I just couldn't cope. So going through that whole experience was tough. I had to go to London for treatment. I came back, and, thank God, like, I was saved. Like, I started to recover, and I always kind of wanted to be an entrepreneur. I always wanted to build something on my own, and I was kind of motivated about building a service that helps others. Um, so I was at that point where I got well, and I was like, "Yeah, I'll try do something now. I'll go out on my own and try and build something." And my wife would have been very supportive of it. But then she got sick. She was on she type 1 diabetes, and she was on dialysis. Her kidneys failed. She was on dialysis right after her son was born, actually, Joey. Her kidneys started to fail, and then in 2019 she'd go on dialysis around the start of COVID. She'd a really bad flu at the time. Maybe it was COVID. It didn't come out for a couple of weeks later. But she was on dialysis, and, I suppose I was sat there after wanting to be an entrepreneur, and then I had my own health struggles, on top of it being undiagnosed ADHD and being totally emotionally dysregulated, unhappy and struggling with my mental health. And then my wife I was like, right, I'll go on now. And then my wife got sick. So I suppose life circumstances prevented me from going into the entrepreneur world and taking a chance. But then I suppose when Simone went on dialysis, it was really difficult, because I suppose I had to be carer effectively then, like, dialysis a couple mornings a week, and, making sure that the medication was administrated properly. And, I've been there for my son, and she started to get sicker and sicker, so that was really difficult. And again, I say it, like, if I was diagnosed back then and I had that emotional awareness, and, uh, the ability to be honest and ask for help, it mightn't have been as bad as it was. But so around the time that my wife became really ill, she had a cardiac arrest after dialysis. And I suppose it was a time in my life really that, you know, I really realized the importance of, life, and what's important, and what's important is, being here and enjoying yourself really, like, enjoying when times are good, enjoy it. My wife would have said to me for at least 10 years, we were together for 15 years, but she said for 15 years, Daniel, you've ADHD. Like, she kept saying it to me, and I was in denial, and I was like, sure, how could I? And, I suppose I'm saying that because I know there's probably people out there, and they're probably saying I don't have it, or maybe in denial or whatever. But what happened for me then was the day before she died, she said, like, I was sitting down with her in the bed, like, and she goes, look, your whole life, like, you wanted to do this, like, she said, This chapter's over for you now, like, I want you to go and back yourself." She said, "And I want you to enjoy the life that you've left. When you're happy, Joe will be happy." And look, I thought I was kind of blown away by that. No, like, looking back, is like a woman that knew that she was going to die, like, she said, "I accept that I'm going to die, and you have to accept it too." But she said, "I really want you to get help for your ADHD." She said, "You are emotionally dysregulated." She goes, "You don't even know who you are anymore. You don't know what you like." And at the time, I suppose I would have been probably undiagnosed ADHD. I would have been like looking to escape what was going on, like, So I obviously would have been drinking and stuff like that. So then at that time, I kind of stopped and looked at myself, and anything that didn't serve me any purpose, I cut out. Like, so I haven't drank in nearly 4 years and stuff, and everything else. So it was like that moment that I was just kind of there looking and saying, how can I be the best version of myself, and how can I actually go and do what I always wanted to do now? It was sad to hear my wife saying this chapter's over for you, but I understand now what she meant. And then, so I was still in denial, Connor, like, she passed away on the 9th of December, and, for a couple of weeks I was disaster, like, it was so difficult, like, I've really good family support, and they were, I was lucky I had them around me, and, my son was 8 at the time, and, he needed somebody to emotionally support him. His mother was after passing away, and I couldn't emotionally support myself. So I went up to my mother's house about 8 weeks after my wife passed away, and I opened the local paper, like, and I saw this guy, I saw ADHD diagnosis, and I started reading the article, and I, like, got a, shiver up my spine. It was like my wife came down and tapped me on the shoulder and said, "This is your Pat." So this guy listed his symptoms, and I was like, this is me, like, is she right? Like, do I really have ADHD? What actually is it? So then I started researching into it, and that's where I suppose the frustration, but the opportunity came at that stage then, because I literally hyper focused on getting that assessment. I went to the GP. He said, "Look, the public services are overwhelmed. You'll be waiting years for access there." Contacted every private provider in the country. None of them were doing online at the time. And I was like, how, no one's answering the phone, no one was emailing me back, and I was totally frustrated. And I carry that frustration with me today, because that's why I built ADHD. But so I went to the UK, went through the assessment process, got my diagnosis, and what I learned about myself, ADHD, it blew me away. It changed my life, because all of a sudden I understood I'm suffering from this all my life. I am emotionally dysregulated. I have this hyperfixation issue. I'm easy distractible. I'm very forgetful. But now I have the diagnosis. What do I do about it? So for me, it was recommended I go down the psychiatry route and take medication, but I declined. I didn't want to take medication. I wanted to, you know, work with a therapist and a clinician consistently, weekly, and I still do, on building that emotional awareness and, emotional resilience. And then what came after that, Connor, then was structure and discipline, which I never had in my life. I was able to catch myself emotionally, were able to regulate myself, and then I became very disciplined and structured. So then I said, look, can I actually create something here? Like, can I actually build a service? COVID has showed us that it can be done online. Can I gather those clinical experts? Can we build the infrastructure? Can we actually execute on this to help other people? Um, and I would have met up with a couple of guys at a networking event, and I ran the idea by them, and they said to me, "Oh yeah, yeah, not sure about that." But then a week later, they rang and said, "Look, we look into that." So we got together. But I'll tell you, this is the amazing part of it. I talk about faith, like, I'm very open about my faith, even in business and life and everything. But a couple of days before my wife died, I was outside the hospital, and as you can imagine, look, I was emotionally dysregulated, upset, full of fear, worry, and anxiety. And this guy approached me, American accent, like, but he said, Are you okay?" Like, and I told him the story, told him about my wife and everything, and he just, it's like God put him there, to be honest with you, because he's a massive part of my life now. I didn't know him at that time. So the following day, he came up and brought flowers into my wife, and she said, "Look, I don't know who that guy is, but I want you to kind of I want you to stay around him." So I was like, "What does she mean by that?" Uh, Long story short, anyway, he supported me. He kept ringing me every day. Then I told him about the idea for ADHD Now. He's a very successful businessman in America. He's from Blarney originally. He was back visiting family, but he went to New York 35 years ago, and he built massive business over there. Real estate with car garages, buying and selling cars, and he had a couple of different dealerships and stuff. So I automatically then, when he was telling me the story, I was like, that's what I want to be like. I want to be a businessman. I want to employ people. I want to, and then so for starting ADHD Now, I gave the idea to the lads, and they were supportive of it, saying, let's get together. But Stephen actually provided 100,000 in capital, and he said, start the company, like, so that we never kind of had to raise any money after that. And he's my business partner, own a couple of different businesses. But like, there was then we brought in, so it was myself, Jack Sterling, and John O'Connor. Then we brought in Matthew Gavin. He's another co-founder as well. So collectively then we all kind of built ADHD Now.
Sorry, Danny, I wasn't sure because I'm kind of constantly thinking, what question am I going to ask next? But like, I'm just so taken aback because you had told me a little bit of that story previously, but it's just the most uh moving and incredible startup story that uh I've ever heard, uh especially from someone so young, right? If you don't mind me saying so. And I think you had said to me previously, oh, I was kind of late starting my entrepreneurial journey, and I was thinking, this guy's, he's younger than me, so what's he talking about? But I think I know what you meant now is because it was always in you, and these kind of spiritual events have occurred in such a way that it's kind of it's brought it out of you now. Does that?
Yeah, makes sense. And like, spiritual experience for me is like my whole change in attitude. And that happened when I spoke to my wife the day before she passed away. It was like my attitude would have been, or like, what am I going to do now? Feel sorry for myself, self pity, like, should God love me kind of way, like, But no, I was kind of there saying, this life is short, like, I had an attitude shift, like, what can I do to make sure that I move forward here? My reaction to this is devastating. It's sad. But how am I going to move forward? How am I going to make a difference in society? How am I going to build services that will help people and children, especially? How am I going to be a good father to my son? Like, I looked around for people to show me the way, like, and look, I'm proud of my reaction at that time, because I didn't know it then, but I know it now, like, that I had the right attitude and reaction towards a desperate time in my life, like, and that motivation, like that fire in the belly of, like, this life is short, like, let's make a difference, let's help people, let's employ people, let's encourage them, let's create opportunities for people. That's the kind of sort of stuff that motivated me around it.
Talk to me then about the ADHD side of it, right? So, um, there's a clarity that comes with it, right? In kind of understanding who you are, and as your wife said to you, you don't know who you are, right? Um, uh, just from my own experience, right? There was a kind of a for me. It was hard for me to know exactly who I was because I didn't want to. I didn't want to maybe um accept it, right? I didn't want to. I couldn't do various things, but I wouldn't. The accepting that to me at the time without the knowledge was, well, I'm stupid. If I accept it, I'm just like basically accepting that I'm stupid, right? Um, and as you said, I can't remember your exact words, but you said something about honesty and acceptance. Um, is that part of this for you?
Yeah, it is. I suppose, like myself, I would have been in denial. Like you said it there, I would have been in denial, but not fully understanding what ADHD is. You know, but not fully understanding the benefits that I would get in my life by accepting it and supporting myself. Better understanding myself and how do I support myself. And a big thing for me, Connor, is the emotional. I spoke about a couple times. Is the emotional regulation. Like we grew up where men didn't talk about emotions. You know what I mean? We were to show a face and be strong all the time. But I was just suffering my whole life because of that. You know what I mean? And it's not like my mom and dad or whatever didn't allow me to show that. I didn't allow myself to show that. And by me actually, becoming emotionally aware and saying like, I do suffer with anxiety, fears take over. I do stress easily, but like this is what I do to combat it. I'm able to catch myself now. I'm able to be accountable about my emotions and how I feel about a certain thing, and I've no problem with talking about them every single day. I even check in with myself a couple of times a day. How am I feeling? How is this making me feel? That the awareness is there now, and by being able to do that has shaped my life. It's just totally flipped over, like But I honestly mean it. I work a lot on it. Like I work with a clinician consistently, and I'm allowed a space where I can, you know, become accountable for my own actions, but also be honest about my struggles and ask for the support. Like I always mention it. Like God has given me two hands. One is to ask for help, and the other is to give help. And that's the way life works for me now. I'm only here because of the help that I got. I obviously have a belief in myself, but but that belief came after my diagnosis, really. So like it's not only helped me emotionally, structured, discipline, it's helped with my belief system and my confidence as well, you know.
There's different types of business people, right? That sit across from me here. Some people are kind of very focused on, well, I don't know, making money and the kind of that side of business. And there's a few, of course, that are kind of really driven by this purpose. I was wondering, could you? It might be difficult to explain, but how having that kind of purpose in business and having that driving you, how is that kind of helpful, and why is it important?
It's very important for me, Connor. Look, we all like to acknowledge the first part of the question. Like we all have to make money to provide for our families. We're living in economic times that's so uncertain. The only thing in the world now that's certain is uncertainty, you know. And for me, it's like the passion behind what I do is that I have compassion for myself being undiagnosed until I was 32 years of age. I can look back and be compassionate, and I don't want the children in this country to have to experience that. Like, if you take it today, a child is in school, broke his hand. If you just picture this, child breaks his hand, goes to the emergency department, sees an emergency doctor, is treated, either, whether that the treatment is an x-ray, surgery, or a cast on the hand or whatever. There's a recovery plan given. There's follow-up physiotherapy and inspections. And that child's physical injury is treated exceptionally well in this country. But you take a child in the classroom today that have anxiety, that have potential ADHD, dyslexia, dyspraxia, autism. What's done? There's no pathway for that child. So I've built these companies to give people, not to say to people go to these companies, but to give them an option of that quick access and support, early medical intervention, but supports. So I'm driven by the purpose of recognizing mental health in adults, but especially children. And how can we be world leader? That's what I want Ireland to be, a world leader in access and supporting our children with mental health. Even anxiety for a child, Connor, it can be crippling. The teacher might know what it is, the child might know what it is. I didn't know what anxiety was myself until I was 32. And the effects of getting medical intervention and support can totally change the direction of the child's life. Like, undiagnosed ADHD, 20% of the people undiagnosed ADHD will have a suicide attempt. 80% of suicide ideation. Undiagnosed ADHD results in prison. I said suicide, divorce, breakdown relationships, bankruptcy. That's what it, but diagnosed ADHD and supported ADHD not only improves societal and family life, but kids' careers. And that's what we need to look at. That's the area that we need. That's what I'm passionate about, because I believe that I believe Ireland can be a world leader in how we treat mental health and neurodiversity. That's the passion. And look, we can all say about success in business, like there's success in life. Success in life to me is that I'm healthy today because I wasn't always healthy, and I'm a responsible parent for my son, and I'm emotionally available to him, and I'm of service to other people. Of course, success in business, I can build services, employ people, encourage them to progress. It's all about helping, giving opportunities to people. I get a buzz out of creating opportunities for people rather than looking at the money that's made, that anything is making.
Do you think, Danny, because the company has been very successful in a very short amount of time, right? And I know everyone says, "Oh, there's no such thing as an overnight success," but this is probably as close as I've come to it, right? Of talking to someone with kind of such a fast and explosive success. Do you think? Um, Obviously, you're doing a great job, right, with this business, and it's a passion. But do you think that? Um, it's nearly because of these realizations that you've had about yourself and almost this. Do you think I don't. I know this is a business podcast, right? But I'm gonna ask. Do you think your success is at least in part due to a kind of a spiritual reason?
Definitely, 100%. Yeah, I do. I believe, because, to include my fellow co-founders and my staff, like how that all came together, like I don't know, like, there's some exceptional co-founders next to me, some amazing people that have, they just turned up in my life at a time that I was ready, and like I do believe, like, that, you know I do, like, I've obviously a lot of faith, like, and I just believe, if I have the belief in myself, I'm willing to work hard every day and surround myself with the right people. Then that's the magic formula for me, really. Belief in myself. I'm willing to work hard, surround myself with the right people, and just keep going, like, day in, day out, like, But I do, like, it's a good question. I've never been asked that before. I do, but it's not me, like. It's something greater than me is providing me with this opportunity and leading me on this path, like.
Talk to me more strategically then. You have had this great success, right? And there's something kind of bigger driving you. What way did you set up the company? Because I think a lot of people, when they first set up a company, they might not think about, what's this going to look like 3 years down the line. Like, you have a strong belief that Ireland can be, a number one in the world, right? A global leader in this area. So it's a big ambition. Not unrealistic. I can always feel how serious you are about it, right? Which is, it convinces me almost instantly talking to you. But yeah, talk to me about the structure, how you set it up, and did you kind of plan for the growth you've had from day one?
Yeah, I did really believe that there was, because I experienced the struggle myself. I was listening to it around, that that there is a unbelievable demand for services. Um, yeah, and we set up, so there's five of us there originally. We set it up on the basis of, let's just, first of all, the clinical governance is, like, that's number one in the business, like, and it's up the real top shelf, like, so clinically, how can we be the best? That was hiring the best. So we've consultant psychiatrist, clinical director, Dr. Vishnu Pradeep. He's amazing. He's been instrumental on all that side of it. I had a group of co-founders that were experienced in the mental health space. Um, you know, and then Stephen in America was experienced life experience in business. So I had all those parts to structurally, they were there with us from the start. Um, and for us really it was, access, once you have that clinical standard, that then you're able to, allow people access. What's the barrier? It's access. It's access and support. And I've kind of built the business on those two things. Build that clinical team, but it's give them access to that clinical team, and then support them going forward. So that's really the, you know, you could say, the blueprint for the business, really. Like,
How do you create that access, right? Because, and this is my understanding, right? Uh, Psychiatrist, you get a referral from the GP, say, and the psychiatrist is, mad busy and can't see them until, they're booked up basically. How have you freed up that space as such with
yeah.
the
So we, by being able to offer it online, and you don't need a referral from a GP to come to our service. You can self refer. So by being able to offer the services online and then recruiting consistently, so we're recruiting to meet the demand, um, and that's basically, that's, you have to retain the clinicians as well. So it's fine going recruiting them. And as I said at the start, like, they're passionate about about the industry too. They've like, we've really some exceptional clinicians in this country. Honestly, like, they really, really care about their career. And when they're, you support them. How do you retain clinicians? You support them. You listen to them. You meet them regular. You offer them engagement and how you can be better every day. And then, like, they look for supervision. They look for, like Dr. Vishnu Pradeep would provide that clinical supervision. They're looking for support. And we've listened to them, and then we're continuously growing and able to retain staff. So, like, at the start, like, once we had the clinical governance in check, everything else, then you like, even the digitalization of the process, and going through the process and the system, the structure of, initial consultation to full assessment to report presentation to then aftercare services. That took a bit of kind of, maneuvering around. But once the clinical stuff was at the top of the table, we it just kind of grew from there then.
I if I was approaching a clinician, right, I would, because I'm coming from a completely different point of view, right? I'm not coming from a medical background. I care about different things, let's say. If I'm just trying to put myself in your shoes, right? Um and because I'm kind of coming to them with a business, if you like, a business idea, right? I would personally, I'd be like, okay, I need to be really mindful here that I'm letting them do what they want to do, okay? And it's more of an observation, but it's just, I just think if you were going to this clinician, there'd just be no problem with any sort of sincerity about the what this meaning is behind it for you. And
Yep.
well, I suppose my question is, did you find it easy once you had met the clinicians to sign them up? Because I could imagine that they would just, where do I sign kind of thing.
Yeah, no, like, as I said, they're passionate about their career, and I'm passionate about the mission. So it took, someone had to really, they took a chance by coming in with me, but those clinicians are still there today. And it's just, building that culture. And I've had clinicians, like, we've had an in-house recruiter, and we've had a clinician join interview. So there's all little pointers that clinicians would give you, like, top clinicians would interview top clinicians. So it's a respect thing with clinicians. But I believe, like, that, you know I'm not a clinician, but it needed a driver of efficiency, the strength to be able to offer ADHD access into a top clinician within 7 days. It needed an efficient business. It needs a model that's efficient. And like, building the digitalization, the systems, the processes, which is my team has built, has allowed us to be more efficient. I suppose building the culture myself and within the organization, that's helped us. So now we have people reaching out, reaching out to us all the time, which is great. But look, yourself, when you're in business or any company or clinic, it's execution what people want to see. They want to see what you stand for. They want to see the consistency of your service. We've 600 plus 5-star reviews, so our service is proven that it works. Like,
What's your role in the business, Danny? We talked a little bit about your background in accounting
yeah,
before we and
yeah,
and the challenges maybe that you had there initially. Um, Within the business now, how has your ADHD kind of molded the position and what you do
yeah.
kind of day in, day out?
So look, we have an exceptional team, like, from clinicians down to operations team to admin team, um, and I'd support, obviously, as the founder of the business. I would support, but I know my strengths as well, but I'd support daily, in operations. Since kind of like June, I've stepped into support operationally, um, and just kind of building and holding that culture is important to me. But I'd be kind of I'd be all over every kind of areas of the business, like in the last couple of months, just to try and mainly just to motivate people and encourage them, and spot out, look for opportunities from, and try and bring people on the journey with us. But for me, it's I kind of I'm getting better now, because I'd be around all parts of it where I'm kind of getting better now. So I'd obviously support, like, strategically, but operationally recently.
And what are your strengths? Like, I know you said you know what your strengths are, and I noticed so you're not the CEO, you have another
Yep.
CEO there who's
Yep.
another founder of the business. Um, how did you kind of, I suppose, decide what you were going to do, and how do you kind of lean into those strengths?
I think, look, I absolutely love business. I said that I love it. I'm passionate about it. I enjoy it every day. But, like, and look, I'm going to humbly say this: I don't have much qualities. Like, I'm very good with people, and I'm willing to work hard. I'm humble enough to take direction from people. And, like, I'm not overly talented at all, Connor. I sit here and say that, like, but I've had life experience that showed me the value of life, and I'm willing to work tirelessly hard, especially in building and creating something and making an impact. Business for me is about impact. It's about execution. If you're gonna say you're gonna do something, then I better deliver. Like, that's my attitude. But I'll be honest with you, like, I could sit here and say that I'm good at this, that, and the other thing, but I'm good with people, and I'll work hard. They're my qualities.
Do you have do you have bad days?
Well, I do, yeah. Like, I do, but never a bad day, I suppose, since my wife died. I'd have a day where I'd be really tired, or, a burnout would come in, as in, like, oh, I could feel before I'm getting burnt out, which is a good thing now. And I know when to stop. I know when to take a break. I do a bit of traveling and stuff, but a bad day to me, really, when you're up in a hospital bed and your wife is saying she'd do anything to stay there with you and your son. You can't have a bad day after that if you're living, like, that's my attitude. Like, I get bad moments within the day, but I never really get a full bad day, because I'm like, you know someone was up in the hospital bed telling me she'd do anything to stay here. I do anything to stay here with you and Joy, but I can't. I have to accept it, and you have to accept it. I don't get bad days after that, because once I'm alive, I have my son in my life, I have a few people around me, I have a life beyond my wildest dreams, like.
How'd you do it? So you're a single parent now, right? You've a young son. You've got this, yeah, albeit thriving business. I'm sure it takes up a lot of time, right? And you have to manage burnout and all that kind of stuff like everyone else. Um, what is your how do you do it?
Well, look, I've really good support. I've my so Simone's mother Joy would stay with her a couple of nights a week. Um and she's very supportive. My own mother and father are unbelievably supportive. I have 3 sisters, they're unbelievably supportive. And, I met a partner, Melanie, and she's been very supportive of me. She have 2 younger kids, Louis and Rio, and it's been great. And as my wife said that time, like, I want you to be happy. And when Melanie came into my life, I said, yeah, I can. I deserve to be happy too. Like, so I'm kind of really surrounded by a lot of support there and encouragement. Like, like even Melanie would encourage me, like, go and do it. Or, even my son, like, when the EY nomination came up, like, he sent me a lovely message, like, it made me cry, like, that I'm so proud of you. He said, God is rewarding you for all your hard work. And I was like kind of taken back by that he was so proud of that, all the struggles that we did have, that, I'm being recognized nationally as for the work that I've put in, like, and my son was able to recognize and acknowledge that. But Connor, I would not be able to do it without the support. The support is amazing, like, and like, that's family. Then you have, the business support that I have, like, unbelievable, another level. Like, the guys, all the lads are just a great group of lads. They all have different qualities, and they'll all support me. Like, I suppose they believed in me too, which was important for me. Um, One or two of them could identify that I was good with people and I would work hard, and, and I was given a chance. So, like, not only the family, but on the work side, I have a lot of support as well. And, they're very accepting of me being a lone parent, like, that joy comes first. I think I was to meet you a few weeks ago, and he was sick out of school. So, and in fairness, you can acknowledge that. But I was like, no matter what's on the table for me, he comes first, like, and it's having that awareness as well, that I need to be there to support them, and I need the support, or otherwise I won't be able to do what I'm doing.
You mentioned the EY Entrepreneur of the Year program, and you're a finalist this year. So, congratulations, first and foremost. What's that experience been like for you?
Oh, it's been unbelievable, honestly. It was when I got called for the interview, when I went up, I was like saying, how has this happened in my life, compared to where I was a few years ago, to this. Honestly, and it's not just me, it's, for the rest of the team, all the staff, the clinicians, the co-founders, my own family, and it felt surreal, really, to be honest with you. But a real proud moment, I suppose, because, I'd be so busy, I never able to stop. And we went to Toronto recently, and I went up, and, I gave my pitch in front of, like, Dennis O'Brien, and, like, Anne Herity, and, it's like Brian O'Sullivan, extremely, successful business people. And standing up there, like, I got nervous, but I gave my story. And when I came down, it was the first time in my life, really, that I felt so proud, like, that, like I said, I done all right now to be here, like, I'm around these people. And I have to say, from the initial interview to being selected to being brought to Toronto on the retreat, it's been amazing. Like, what an exceptional group of people. I said it over there, it was like Disneyland for business people.
Mm.
You just have that experience and success everywhere. But I couldn't believe the humility from the alumni. Like, really, like, the encouragement, the belief, the advice. It suited, that environment suited me, like, and it also made me think of what's possible. And it also showed me, if I want to become the leader that I want to become, this is how you behave, this is how you treat people, you be of service to others. So, like, credit to EY, really, because it's like, people told me about it, but when I actually saw it, I said, this is an amazing, amazing opportunity for me, and just the people that were there, down to the organization of the trip. And it was amazing. Like, I was chatting to Dennis O'Brien, like, just casually, like, and, what a great bit of advice he gave me, like, so I really feel very blessed to being selected. And, as you said, I'm from Knocknaheeny in Cork, like, and so when I came out of school, it was the expectation was to get a trade, and that's fine. I've no problem with a trade, but I wouldn't have liked it. I wouldn't have been physically able for it. Like, I literally can't put a kinder tie together, like, I'm useless when it comes to my hand, like. So imagine putting me on a building site, like. But that was the expectation. But I was able to, see that other thing. And now I'm starting to think, it doesn't matter what your life experiences are. It doesn't matter, what your education is. It doesn't matter, like, it doesn't matter where you come from, or who you are, or what you are, that you can be successful. Like, if you're willing to work hard enough, that you can become successful. And, life changes as well, and we have to be okay with that. But I have no fear around the future. Like, my head is on today. Once I enjoy today, once I don't hurt or harm anyone, and put in an honest day's work, then that's successful day for me, like.
There's something very And I hope you don't mind me sort of talking about you, right? But there's something very kind of magnetic about how you're talking, right? I've tried to kind of I'm trying to put my finger on it basically, right? But obviously there's an alignment with you that uh that's rare, I think, across the board, right? Not actually, it's probably more common in entrepreneurs, but I think across the board of people, it's very rare to have such alignment, right? And even the way you said there that you were so proud, you were a bit nervous, right, standing up in front of them, and giving your pitch, but when you came down, you were so proud of yourself. I think that um I don't know. There's probably people listening to this that have given that pitch, right? And when they got down, the kind of the imposter syndrome took over a bit, and they beat themselves up a little bit about it. But it just seems like, does imposter syndrome ever creep in with you? It seems like it doesn't, but perhaps it does at some stage.
Well, it did. It definitely did, It did, but no, it's like, yeah, this is my life. These are my life experiences. This is what I do every day. This is where I am now, and this is where I want to go. And I have full faith and trust in my journey. As I said, once I get up in the morning and, I put in that honest day's work, I don't hurt or harm anyone. And if I do, I'll apologize. I'm able to have the humility to recognize that I'm wrong and apologize. And I just following, in God's path, really, for me. Like, that's the way I look at it.
How far out do you look? So this thing about Ireland being a global leader, say, right, and your kind of overall purpose. But do you put timelines on your goals, or how far out do you look into the future?
Well, look, obviously, you know yourself, being in the accountant background, that you have to look at projections and you have to go by budgets and forecasts and stuff like that. So we do all that stuff, but I literally don't put too much pressure on. I obviously have goals, like as I said, but I don't put too much pressure on it because you could work, you could give every single effort, you could set a goal and give every single effort to get to that goal. But an unforeseen circumstance like a war or something like that might take that away from you. So like I think people it's good to set goals, but people, they put too much pressure on themselves to reach them, when actually I'm putting all their happiness upon reaching that goal, when it might be totally taken away from you, and you might have done everything that you could do. So I'm kind of accepting of life, like, on life's terms, basically, like, and that's kind of helped me in that regard. Not to say I'm not driven, and I do set goals, as I said. Why can't we be the leader in the country on how we treat neurodiversity and mental health is in adults, especially in children? Like, where is the pathway? Like, where's the pathway forward from? How can we create the best pathway for those kids? Because the mind is as important as anything else.
Danny Buckley. I actually, I could sit here, I don't know whether it's your accent or what it is, but I could sit here and listen to you all day, really, right? But I don't want to take up too much of your time, right? You're a busy man. Um, I I don't even know if I have a final question, because I would just feel like we could almost just leave it there. But what does the future hold for the business and for you, and what does it look like over the next couple of years, do you think?
Yeah, I think for me, really, I'm very interested in the mental health space. I'm very hands-on in the mental health space now. So we've ADHD now and autism care, and I'm looking to acquire another company within the mental health space that will focus on post-diagnostic support services. So can we continue to drive efficiencies, and then, you know, with the hope of strengthening the public system. So we are doing some work for the HSE at the moment, which I'm very grateful for, because that was always the vision, that can we strengthen, but can we further support and strengthen the public system? That's my goal, really, is to be that, to create access for kids, to try and reduce waiting lists and try and give them a pathway forward. To be fair, there's a lot of effort. People are probably not seeing it yet, but there's a lot of efforts being made in the background, um, by HSE and government, on acknowledging the demand and services for ADHD, autism, the whole mental health side of it. There's a new Mental Health Act, which I know Mary Butler has worked tirelessly on, and I've seen it, and it's pretty supportive. So I think, there'll be a lot of people be critical of the services, and I do have compassion for people waiting there, but I can say that there is a lot of efforts being put in the background, and I think we'll start to see the results of it over the next couple of years, you know.
We've covered a lot in this, and I have been blown away, right, by everything we've talked about. Is there anything to your mind that you want to leave us with, or that you feel like we haven't maybe touched on during this conversation?
Yeah, no, I suppose, look, it's just the importance of access, really, you know, and for me in my life, like, I know I've said it a couple of times during the podcast, but just for people that would listen in, like, it's just, you know, our kids are important, like, you know, and it's important to support them, and that medical intervention is important, and support them in the pathway forward, because for me in my life, I struggled up until I was 32, really did. And now I would like to think that I'm thriving because of that medical intervention and support, and obviously the life experiences. But like, your child may be struggling now, but they can thrive. What do you need to do about it? Like, I always say, for anyone that has children, if they have any challenges, we just want to know how to help them. And that's my passion, is create and build services to help kids moving forward.
Danny Buckley, thank you very much for coming in.
Thanks a million, Connor. Thanks for having me.